So, and I'm going to go over to couple of things. One, I did an announcement, and I might do a little bit on this. This is what I did this weekend. That's why I don't remember it. I wrote a couple of blog entries on GitHub. So I'll let you see it in a moment. We'll go over one piece of it after we go over the stuff for the assignment. So what I did is there's a basic discussion of GitHub here. The first part of this is about how you put things up on GitHub, and it covers using the web page. So doing it all from the web page, you can do it all from the web page. And then I did the Windows client, and then I did the command line. All right. These pictures are really hard to see, but if you click on them, you can pop them out, and they're a little bit easier to read. I just used the snipping tool and cut them out of the thing. So anyway, and then I actually listed the command line. The command line is actually the easiest way once you get the hang of it. All right, so that's just putting them up there. And then the second part, which we might look at some point, is basically copying, downloading, and forking these files. So you can, it's pretty easy to copy them from the, this is just copying the code, and I can show you some of that. Or you can download it. You can download it by just downloading the zip, or you can fork it, which means you can actually take somebody else's code and bring it into your own GitHub site. And then you can use it as the basis for your project. One of the things about GitHub is if it's public, they are committed to open source. That means everything is takeable. Anybody can take your code and do what they want with it. So one part that isn't here yet that I'll talk about, maybe I'll write up a third part of this, is version control and how you can, if you do take somebody's code, you can push it and they can incorporate your changes into theirs. And branching, which is where you have multiple versions of the same. That this is typically like when you're working in teams, and you can keep track of what changes each team member made, which you have to be careful about. GitHub is really good, but you can get kind of messy there. So I did that. I look a little bit because you've been interested in doing it with Visual Studio. So it's actually really easy to open your code in Visual Studio, but it's a little harder to upload it from Visual Studio. And I'll look into it more. For a full integration of Visual Studio and GitHub, they want a paid version of GitHub. So we'll look at those. But as I said, we'll look at those a little bit after what we're going to do for today. And I'll probably only just show you a couple of things that get you started if you want. Again, GitHub is a really nice way to do your assignments, and it also gives you a history that you can show an employer sometime because the code is there and it's available, etc. A lot of you are doing GitHub. Some of you are just uploading the files, which is fine. And I actually have only had one person who isn't here today upload the solution file. The solution file has nothing in it. It does me no good. The solution file, all it does is say, this is a solution that has these projects in it. That's all. It's an XML file that lists the projects that belong to the solution. So it's useless to me. Okay, are we ready, sort of? I'm going to zoom up a little. You guys have questions? So what I want to do, I know some of you are still working on the last project, the last assignment, but I want to show you how to do the client side of it. And as I've said, in all of these things, the client side is the easy side. This will be much easier than the service was. So I'm trying to think of which, we did a sample service, class exercise. Which one do we want to do? I guess the sample service. And then we'll look at the assignment after we go over this. So I'm going to open up the sample service. And in this service, we get the books, and we get the authors, and we get the books, right? I'll run it again just so you can see it, and we can talk through it briefly if you want, just to reacquaint. So it has get authors, and I can invoke that and do OK. And it should give me a list of authors. There we go. All right, and then if I do get books, it wants an author name. So I saw, let's do Brian Green. Does Green have an E at the end? No, I don't think so. And I get one book for them, right? And it has just the 0 initially, but when you click that, it shows the object, right? And we made the object for that. Do you guys need to review this? This is what we did as a sample in class, and it uses the book review database. Now, for what we need to do, you guys all well, there was one we did before. We did one after it, too. I think I posted, did I post this one on GitHub or just on the blog? Let's go to here. I'm going to go. I want to see if it's on the blog. If it's on the blog, so let's go down below the 2 GitHubs.
Was it a website with a drop-down?
ADO Classic, that's not it. So is it, here is the code. So the entry for this is Windows Communication Service, Thursday, April 21st. Do you want me to show how you would create this from the blog?
Is this the one with the get authors, get books?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's sample service.
Right, sample service. A lot of you have it. If you don't have it, all right, so I'm going to real quickly, we'll just recreate it. Well, so a couple of things you have to do if you're going to recreate it. You have to rerun the entities. So I guess I'll show. But so I'm going to do a, oh, this is still running. File, new, website. Now, one of the advantages from GitHub is you could just download it and then run it. Except you have to change the, you might have to change the thing. So I'm going to make it an empty website. I'm going to call it sample service 2. I'm going to do OK. So it's just an empty website. Called it sample service 2. I'm going to run the ADO again because I didn't upload that code, so you're just going to have to recreate it. So I'm going to add ADO entity net model. And I'm going to, I guess I'll call it book review model, which may be what I called it last time. What?
No, my screen is empty. I can't find my
So go, if you file, or actually view solution, there you go. And then we're going to add ADO entity. And then it says it needs to go in an app code folder.
We're adding an ADO.
Right, so right click and do add. And it should be in the list there, ADO entity. And then yes. And then basically we just go through this wizard, which you should get to know in your sleep. I mean, it's something we'll be doing over and over again. Designer from database. We need to, that is not a connection that I want, so I need a new connection. I'm going to do SRV 38.
You don't need to do this if they're-
No, you don't need to do this if you already have it. This is only if you don't have it. Book review DB. All right, do OK. This needs only 3 tables, so just do next and next. So when you get to the tables, it needs author, author book, and book. It needs those 3 tables. So on that one, what did it do?
What did you do? I put it, I put SRV.
It'll take it 30 seconds to update. And then choose from the bottom list, book review. Okay, then just do next and next. And in the tables, you want author, author book, and book. And then finish. And again, you don't have to do this if you've already got it. It's taking a while. There it goes. Get the warnings. Just do OK on them. If it comes up says you need to save your solution or something, do that. I'm going to save again. I do not know why, but sometimes if you don't actually save it again and do the warnings again, it won't be there. All right. Now, we might have to change a couple of things, but I'm going to add the services. What did I name the services in the blog? So it is sample book reviews service. So I'm going to do that even though it's in the, it should be okay because it's a different project. So I'm going to right click, add WCF service. I'm going to call it sample book review service. You don't have to call it the same, but I'm going to do OK. All right. Now you can just cut and paste the code. So I go there, and we've got the interface, right? So I'm just going to do that and the data contract. Go back here and just highlight over, well, so we started here, so start from there down, paste it in. Oh, you know what? I have to fix that in the blog. I forgot to escape my angles. So this one was Booklight. Okay. So I'm going to go to the service. And again, if I go to the blog, I can go down here and just do the all those two methods. Just copying them. I'm going to paste them into the service. And again, I need to add string. And I need to add, oh, that one's book light, right? That should be book light. So it's sort of a pain to copy. It's actually easier from GitHub. What? It isn't on GitHub. I probably should have. What is it not like about that? Oh, did I not get the class? Let's go back to the blog. I left out a couple of lines. Be careful when you're copying and pasting. And then that needs to be list. I could fix that, but I'm not going to right now. I will. Am I fixed? I think it'll run now, and I'll go through it again if you want. There are a couple little things I had to fix, but yeah, it's running. So that's actually just to get it off the blog. Again, from the GitHub, you could just download it. So I may do that more often now. All right, do we want to use this one or the original one? Doesn't matter, I guess. So one of the things that we need to do is we need to have this running to do the client. This isn't real world, but it's because we don't have the underlying permissions that we need to set up IIS on these machines. There is a document in the files that talks about doing that, although I don't guarantee it'll work if you follow those steps. I'm going to try to revisit it and make sure I have all the steps in there. It's a pain, just to tell you, it's a real pain to configure IIS. But so what we're faking it is we're going to have 2 copies of Visual Studio running. And one copy will have the service, and then the other copy of Visual Studio will have the client. This is running IIS Express. So it is running a version of, of Internet Information Explorer, but it's running an Express version. It isn't available outside this machine, right? So there's a couple of places. This one, you would probably want to host it in IIS, and typically you might host it in something like Azure or even AWS, which is Amazon's web services. You can do a Windows machine on an Amazon web service, and you can have IIS and host it there. So generally, you'd want to, Azure is Microsoft's web services. Typically, you want to host it somewhere where you can get to it from anywhere with just an IP address, right, or an HTTP address. So we're kind of faking that by running the 2 copies of Visual Studio. If you actually hosted it in those places, you wouldn't need to run another copy of Visual Studio. Right? So there's a couple of things. I'm going to leave this running for a moment, and I'm going to come down here to the tray, and I'm just going to right-click on the Visual Studio icon. And what I want to do is just click on Visual Studio again right here. And what that'll do is it will launch a second instance of Visual Studio. It's an awkward way to do it, but it'll give us the effect. Does that make sense? So I have 2 copies of Visual Studio. And you can kind of see that down here, the icon has a double. It's almost impossible to see on the screen, but there's 2 of them there. They kind of are slightly offset from each other. And I'm going to create, like always, a file, new website. Visual C#, an empty website, and I'm going to call it Sample Service Client. Did you get yours up and going, Richard?
No.
Ah.
I'll get the others first, but I'll do this. I'll just say,
Okay.
we can do that after that.
So this is going to be the client. So what the client has to do, and just going to do OK, is it needs to connect to that service, right? So one of the first things I'm going to go to do, this little thing that looks like a console, that's the test environment. I need the address, right? So I'm going to copy the address there. It's localhost 45399 / sample book review.
Oh, to run your other?
Yeah, it has to be running. The sample service has to be running for this to work. And when it's running, we can go and steal the address. It's a temporary address.
Where are you seeing it? I am running.
So down here where I know run it though. Actually have it.
Oh, maybe it's not there.
Yeah.
So it's running.
And then the address is right there. Yeah, so this box, this test box has to be running. Yeah. Are you running? No.
To the airport.
So we need that address, and we need to leave this service running. So in this one, what we want to do is we want to right-click, add, and what we want is a service reference. So it's about midway down, service reference. We might do this a couple of times.
Is it necessary to have it running to get that, or?
Yes, it is.
For the, okay.
So we added a service.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the menu options that you had on your screen, I'm not sure why it's not.
That's where that.
Because you can't add a service register to solution only. So I'm going to paste my address in there. All right, so what we're doing is we're tying this website. This is actually going to have a web page. And we're tying it to the service. And you can do more than one service. You can tie it to a dozen different services if you want. I'm going to say go, and it finds the service. It will only find it if it's running. Notice it says iSample book service, book review service. If I double click this one that's been done, it'll show me my two methods, get authors and get books.
That's kind of weird. So it's kind of like, you know, you're pulling the information from the database, but you're pulling it from the service.
Right. So the idea is that this web page has no direct contact with the database.
That's right.
Right, so it calls the service. The service is what has contact with the database.
And the service only gives you what it wants.
And the service only shows you what it gives you these methods, and so you have no idea even what the database is named. You have no idea where the database is.
But that's a PDF.
Right, and that, all of that's
web applications off of whatever.
right, and you can just pull, but you get to pull in the data, and it's much more secure again because the web page doesn't have any direct channel to the database.
So real world, you know, is it separated between the people who create the services and the people that use the services?
Right, so typically they're not the same people.
Okay.
All right, we're doing both sides. Typically, like if you're creating a web page, you just go, and you can do this without knowing anything really. You can go to Amazon and say, I want to use this Amazon service, and they will give you the code, usually JavaScript. JavaScript, which usually calls their underlying code, which may be in Java or something.
So that's how.
Yeah, and you just paste the JavaScript into your code, and you've got it. Or Google Maps. You just go to Google and say you want to use Google Maps. They make you register. But once you've registered, they just give you a snippet of code to put in your you know, your app, and then you've got Google Maps.
The internet's like Legos. Right?
Yes. And so these services are everywhere, actually. And some of them are free, like Google Maps. I mean, you have to register, and some cost money, right? There are news aggregators services. There are weather ones. There are lots of weather ones that are free. So you can go out and you can get them. Now, this Discover and stuff, generally you have to figure out, do a search and figure out where the service is, because it doesn't go and find them. It used to, but there's so many of them anymore, it doesn't even bother. But a Google search for particular services will usually bring up a lot of them. And but you know, just when you're building an app, like split up among teams, kind of like in the systems analysis class. So there would be people building the services, and they would be separate from the people building the web pages typically. And probably the people building the database is another layer, right?
Do we want to change that name?
Yeah, I was going to change it. What do we want? Book review, service reference? If you don't want such a long name. I'm trying to be fairly verbose to be semi-clear, although as you know, a lot of times I do a one-letter thing. So I'm going to do OK. And that links us to the service. And I don't know that it shouldn't necessarily matter, but if you wanted to look at what that involves, it involves a lot of files. Again, you don't have to do these, but it has the, these are all XML files. It has the Windows, or the, not Windows, web service description language, and then these are all schema, right? Schema is an XML document. And again, let's look at a schema real quick, except it always wants to do it this way. I want to look at it from XML. I think if I do, Can I do view code? I just don't want to look at it in this view. I want to look at it as XML. Oh, well, that's not. This is a diagram version of the XML. This is like all of the data types and stuff. I don't want to mess with it too much. I will close it. I would rather just look at it as XML. But what it does is it loads all this XML as a way of telling you what the, I don't want the Server Explorer either. I want Solution Explorer. Okay. And we'll just close that. But oh, there's some XML. It passes all this information to the client so that they know it knows what it can talk to. And I'll show you that in just a second. The other way to do this, and I've been playing with it, but is again, the Microsoft tools generate this XML automatically, so you can almost ignore that it's there unless you have to troubleshoot it. The other way to do it is JSON, which is JavaScript with a basically a name value pair. It's like a JSON object, JavaScript object. And that's actually lighter weight and faster, and actually it's more in use these days. And you can do it with this also. It's just, it takes a little bit more programming on your part. Microsoft has built-in objects to handle JSON scripts, but if I figure it out enough to explain it coherently and easily, I will do that. We don't need this XML right now. What we want to do is add a web page. So we have the reference to the service, and what I'm going to do now is just add a web form. And I'm going to leave it as default. I wonder what they're cooking downstairs.
Just asking about it.
What?
It smells delicious.
It does smell like it has some bacon part to it, at least.
That's where they have the fancy restaurant.
Yeah. So this is this sample is just doing kind of what we did with the classic ADL, but we're just doing it differently. So we have this service here. I'm just going to add into here a list, a drop-down list. Oh, I just clicked it and it was there. Okay. And a grid view. So I'm going to go, again, that's way down here in data. So if data isn't open, if it looks like that, you just click the little triangle, and we want a grid view. I'll show you some of the other tools later. The grid view is the least imaginative of the tools. It's just a table. Some of the others you have a lot more formatting capability. So I'm just going to do those two things, a drop-down list and then a grid view. The drop-down list will show the authors, and the grid view will show the books. If you want, you could like name this author drop-down list. You could name this book grid view. It's not a bad idea to name these, particularly if you're going to have more than one. Do we want to run this on a button, or do you want to run it on the change of author? I haven't shown you a button, some say. All right, we could do a button. So I'll add a button too. So I'm going to leave it named button 1, but I'll change the text to like get books.
Do we want to change the button ID to something else too?
If you want. I just don't know what I would name it. Book button? I don't know. All right, so I'm going to go down to just show it in design view. And it's not very exciting. And you certainly, you know, all the CSS, anything you wanted to do, I'm not going to, but you could. So the first thing we're going to do is fill the drop down. Okay. And the code for this is actually going to be really, really simple. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to view code. It's the easiest way to get there. We will double click the button in a minute, but I would have got us there too. I right clicked into the design and I said view code. You can also right click into the source, the HTML, and say view code, and it'll come to this page. I'll make my own method for this. I'm going to just say protected void get or fill author drop down. How's that? And then curly braces. Okay, so I got both of them. One of the things I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it up here because we need it in two places, is I'm going to do, so we called it was sample service. Why am I not getting?
Sample book? Is it capitalized?
Well, I'm just wondering why, oh, so that's because, what did we name it? It's book review service. Book review service reference dot, and what you always want is the client. And I'm going to give it a name, BSC equals new, not mu, book review reference service client. Okay, so what that is, kind of like what we did with the, now if you named it something else, like if you left it as service one, then this would be service one. It might be service one reference, but it'd be.
Does it matter that mine's not capitalized?
It only matters if it just has to match what you named it.
Okay.
So if you didn't capitalize it in your name, then it'll come up. Did the IntelliSense give it to you?
Yeah.
So go with what the IntelliSense gives you, because that's the way you typed it.
Okay.
Trying to figure out. I think I left on service one.
Yeah, so it's service reference one. So just type service. There it is, service reference one. And then dot. Should have service reference client. Or service client.
Service client, thank you.
Yeah. All right, so this ties us to the reference, which ties us to the services, right? So I can do, I want to create basically, I'm going to do a string, not a sting, a string array called, I'll just call it authors, is equal to BSC dot get authors. Notice it has down here, it has the methods, get authors, right, anyway, we can get there. So I'm going to do get author, and then just do this, okay? And then I'm just going to say book, it was author. Author drop-down list, dot data source, equals authors. Author drop-down list, data bind. That's all I have to do to get the authors. Except I have to call it from, oh, I did it in page load. I wanted to do it down here. Let me call it from page load. The other thing you have to do, if you remember, if not is post back. That allows you to keep the list where it is when you select something. I'll run it here in just a second. This is a weird thing, and I'm not sure why. On the service side, it's a list, but it wants it to be just an array here. And how do I know that? Because it kept failing when I did list them. You know, not some big insight. It's just that it didn't work as a list, and it did work as an array.
I have a different
Me too.
title on book review service reference.
Sure, it's whatever you named it.
Anywhere.
When you added the service, whatever you named it. Go back to the top and see the example service file. So you might have wanted to. That's one for the assignment. So when you look at the service that you're running, the spreadsheet tracker service, you can make it work. It's just that you're gonna have different content. The point is whether you get the actual. The point is that you add the service reference and then you make a link to it in code, right? Just like we had to link to the ADO. This will, if I run it, it'll fill the drop-down list with all the author names. See, there they are. They're not, it gets them from the service, writes them into an array and attaches it to the code. Does that make sense? Did it work for you guys? Nope. That don't work. What, are you getting an error? Did you call? You need to call it from the page load. You haven't called it. If you don't call it from the page load, you won't get anything. Yeah. Right, so there's no get off this. One of the things you could do is call it. Just go back to the top. Again, if you don't do this, if not is post back, it'll always go to the top of the list when you select something. Won't let you select anything else except at the top of the list. Again, the not is post back, what it does is it says that load the list the first time the page loads, But after that, leave it at its current state, and there's a hidden field that stores that state. And that goes back and forth to the server. That's a behavior you can turn off, but if you turn it off, it means you have to keep track of things, which means you have to write cookies or something. All right, so I'm going to go back to the design. So the default, and I'm going to double click the book, the button, get books. Oh, I'm still running. Can't do this if you're still running. So I'm going to double click the books, and it gives me the button click, right? If you just type this in by itself, it'll do nothing. As I've said before, but it's a common thing when things aren't working. It's just that it's not even seeing your button. So if I go back to the default ASPX, go to the source, you'll see that when I double clicked it, it added on click equals book button underscore click. That has to be there for the other one to work. And the other one has to be there or it'll throw an error. If this is here and the other one isn't, it'll throw an error. If you double click the button, it automatically creates that event for you. But you can do it by hand by doing on click equals and typing your own name and then doing it the other. So I'm going to go back to the code. And again, this is going to be pretty easy too. But remember that we had a data contract with this? And actually, I was playing with it the other day. It's actually just about as easy to get the like author and things like that. But so what I am going to do, we need to get that class because we said we would pass that class. Actually, did we say we didn't say we'd pass that class in, did we? But we do need to return not a list, but a. So I'm going to do. What is my name of my service? Book review service reference. Right? So there, when I apply it, it's right at the top. And generally, I can see any class that is either part of the data reference or that I said I was going to return. So I'm going to do book light. And I'm going to create an array of that, right? Equals BSC dot get books. Now, actually, there's an argument here we have to provide. To do that right above it. Drop down author drop down list. So we need like author, string author equals author drop down list dot selected item, and I think I want text. We'll see if that works. And then I'm going to do author here. Oh, I need to give this a name. And then I'm going to, I called it book grid view. So book grid view dot data source equals books. Book grid view dot data bind. And I did this in the button, which I don't usually do, but that's it'll work there.
You always have to bind, right?
You do always have to bind, and I'm not entirely sure what the binding does, but it won't work if you don't.
Maybe it binds it.
It binds it to the control somehow. Yeah. So basically, we're just getting the author from the drop-down list, we're calling the get books method and passing it the author. Now, we're returning an array of book light objects. So to get to book light objects, I have to go through the service, right? The service understands the objects that were in the data contract. And then I just bind it, the array, and then as a data source and bind. It should work. Let's see if it works. Then we'll come back and we can talk about it. We'll look at the assignment to see what's involved with that too. Oh, that's not good. Did this happen to everybody? Shouldn't. Yeah, it should work.
Can you go back to the code?
Yeah, I'm going to have to. No, I don't want to close all those. All right, so this is my service still running? Yes. So I'm going to choose Deleuze get books, and that worked. If I choose Neruda get books, I think I've only got like one book for each. Kim Stanley Robinson get books. So there is a book. I think there's a book for just about every author, at least one. Okay. Again, the formatting is really ugly. The other one still needs to be running, yes. Again, that's not really real world, but that's how it's got to work on this local environment. We would want to host the service somewhere where it could be accessed, yeah. Yeah, although the point is just so
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, but you can check to see if the address
Did it literally say that? No. His name is
Hi.
They did say something.
Yeah. Well, I'm just.
What's the shooting?
Something. It might be in your service.
Like audio views and said, I know what's in store for you on your morning picture of player.
So I'm going to close this. Does that make sense? Now notice, okay, so I'm going to kill this, but we didn't really have to write a lot of code. On the client side, all you have to do is make that reference to the services and call the method in the services, and then in this case bind it to the controls, right? That's all it takes. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 7 lines of code here. It's not hard to access the services. It can be, and I'll warn you this, it can be really hard to troubleshoot because a lot of times the trouble is not here, it's on the service side, right? And the error you get here will be for the web page, and you'll have to go to the service and look and see where it crashed there.
So, I mean, don't we sort of preempt that by creating the service first? Or?
Well, you should. If you make the service and test it first,
Yeah.
then it should work over here. But you know, if things are going wrong, it's typically on the service side that it's going wrong. There are some things you can do. You can have the service throw forward errors, and you can capture the errors here so that you can see what's happening on the service to some extent. We might do some of that. Now, this is, are there other questions on this? Because I think what I'll do is do the GitHub thing to post this up. Do you want that as a separate video? Yeah. So I think what I'll do is I'll go down to here, and it looks like it did pretty good. So I'm going to stop.